Stop trying to predict the future to win your trades. The absolute secret to professional execution is learning to operate in a state of not having to know what happens next. Listen to me carefully here, because what we're going to cover in this explainer is going to completely rewire how you interact with the markets as a professional trader. If you are just exhausted by the emotional roller coaster of trading, the hesitation, the premature bailing out, the devastating losses, you are absolutely in the right place. We're going to unpack the exact psychological framework that separates consistent, professional market players from, well, everyone else.
Honestly, operating in that state of not having to know what happens next, it is the ultimate superpower. You do not need a crystal ball to be a highly profitable trader. In fact, relying on your own intellect to somehow outsmart the market is the exact illusion that's holding you back. When you convince yourself that you know the next tick on the chart, you are attaching your ego to the outcome. And that desperate need to know, that need to be right, it guarantees that you'll misread the data and totally sabotage your own execution.
Okay, let's dive into this. Section 1. The prediction trap.
It sounds totally counterintuitive, right? I mean, in almost every other profession on Earth, the more you know, the better you perform. But trading is fundamentally different. It is simply a pattern recognition numbers game. The more you think you know what the market is going to do, the less successful you'll actually be. The moment you assume you know what happens next, you automatically expect to be right. And when the market inevitably does something different, your brain interprets that information as painful. It triggers these conscious and subconscious defense mechanisms that literally blind you to the real opportunities right in front of you. Amateurs live in this illusion. Because they have to know what happens next, they are terrified of being wrong, and they go to incredible lengths to avoid acknowledging a mistake. But the pros, the professional mindset, thinks strictly in probabilities. They execute their edge purely mechanically. They completely accept risk, which means they can look at market data objectively, without any of that emotional pain.
To really grasp what happens when you refuse to acknowledge a mistake, imagine you're walking across a bridge that spans the Grand Canyon. The width of that bridge? That represents your position size. If you trade a single contract, you're strolling on a nice, comfortable 20-foot wide bridge. You've got a massive tolerance for error. But as you size up, that bridge shrinks. One massive floor trader, mentioned in our source material, used to regularly trade 500 to 1,000 treasury bond futures at a time. At that massive scale, the bridge narrows down to the size of a thin wire. One tiny misstep, one momentary gust of wind, or, in trading terms, one distracting thought where you lose focus and refuse to acknowledge an error, means you miss your split-second chance to liquidate. The result? A 1-mile drop straight down. Complete disaster.
Section 2. The mechanical stage.
So take a breath. How do we cross this canyon safely? How do we stop those euphoric, reckless mistakes and that fear-based paralysis that ruins a perfectly good equity curve? Well, we do it by entering the mechanical stage. This stage is specifically designed to systematically strip away any susceptibility you have to making fear-based or euphoric errors. Look, this isn't about slapping a new indicator on your chart. It's about building internal self-trust, absolute confidence, and the real ability to think purely in probabilities. Once you master this stage, you build a steadily rising equity curve with only minor drawdowns. You virtually compel yourself to create consistent results.
Section 3. Rewiring your beliefs.
Now, what's really interesting about this concept is that these trading skills we're talking about, they are entirely psychological in nature. In their absolute purest form, they are simply beliefs. And beliefs are just conscious, energized concepts that demand to be expressed in our lives. So if your main objective is to produce consistent results, you have to actively construct a dominant belief that says, I am a consistently successful trader. Now, you might think building that requires some innate self-discipline, but self-discipline isn't a personality trait you're just born with. It's a mental technique. The author of our source material shares this brilliant story from back in 1978. He was completely out of shape and decided, I want to become a runner. He set a goal to run 5 miles, but immediately his brain threw up massive conflicting thoughts. Oh, it's raining. I'm too tired. My favorite TV show is on. To beat this, he didn't use magic. He used self-discipline to simply redirect his attention. He made a strict rule. Put the running shoes on and just take one step further than yesterday. Little by little, those conflicting thoughts faded. The energy transferred. Eventually, he didn't even need the discipline anymore because I'm a runner had become his actual identity. We have to do the exact same thing with our trading.
Section 4. Principles of consistent success. To build that dominant belief that you are a consistent winner, you can't just wish for it. That's way too abstract. You have to break it down into 7 core sub-beliefs, which we call the principles of consistent success. Let's walk through them together. Number 1, I objectively identify my edges. Number 2, I predefine the risk of every single trade. Number 3,
I completely accept risk, or I am willing to just let go of the trade. Number 4, I act on my edges without reservation or hesitation. Number 5, I pay myself as the market makes money available to me. Number 6, I continually monitor my susceptibility for making errors. And finally, number 7, I understand the absolute necessity of these principles and therefore I never violate them. When you integrate these 7 principles into who you fundamentally are, trading consistently becomes effortless. I mean, it wouldn't even occur to you to trade without a stop loss, just like it wouldn't occur to a marathon runner to go out without lacing up their shoes.
So the crucial point is Section 5, trading like a casino.
The real shift happens when we move your perspective from the gambler sitting at the slot machine crossing their fingers for a payout to the perspective of the casino owner. The casino owner knows exactly how the math plays out at the end of the day. The goal is to convince yourself, deep down, that trading is just a simple game of probabilities. At the micro level, the outcome of any individual trade is completely independent and entirely random. You literally cannot know if the next trade is a winner or a loser. But at the macro level, over a whole series of trades, the outcomes will always produce consistent results as long as the odds are in your favor. When you trade like the casino, you own the game.
But to actually prove this to your own mind, you have to stop living and dying on the result of your most recent trade. You have to commit to trading in sample sizes. For any edge you define, you need a systematic approach over a sample size of at least 20 trades. Why 20? Because 20 trades gives you enough data to filter out the random variables. It lets you truly evaluate if your edge works without emotionally breaking down just because you caught 2 or 3 losses in a row.
Section 6. The risk-free opportunity.
Okay, to permanently integrate these principles into your mental environment, our source gives us an exact, rigid trading exercise. This is where the mechanical stage hits the actual markets. And listen, this exercise demands absolute precision. First, you pick a market and you choose an edge. Your trade entry variables must be 100% objective. If the market aligns, you take the trade, period. Zero subjective judgments. Second, your stop-loss exit has to be strictly defined by market structure, not some arbitrary dollar amount you pulled out of thin air, and you determine it before you ever click buy or sell. Third, your entry and exit signals must all be based in a single time frame to avoid any conflicting data. No extraneous factors allowed. This is purely mechanical execution.
And this brilliantly illustrates what is widely considered the absolute hardest skill to master in trading, taking profits. Seriously, think about it. If you genuinely accept that you never actually know how far the market is going to go in your direction, how on earth do you know when to take your money off the table?
The most effective psychological solution here is to scale out of your position. Divide your position into thirds. When the market moves just slightly in your favor, take 1/3 off immediately. In the source text, the author noted that when trading T-bond futures, the market almost always went his way by a few ticks before pulling back or reversing, so he built a habit of taking profits right there. Once you take that first third off, you immediately move your stop loss on the remaining position to your original entry point. Then you just let that final portion run to a larger, predetermined, longer time frame objective. What you've just created with this setup is profound. You have manufactured a risk-free opportunity. Because you booked that initial profit and moved your stop to break even, there is literally no way for you to lose money on this trade under normal market conditions. The psychological relief of this is just staggering. The panic vanishes. You actually get to experience what it genuinely feels like to be in a winning trade with a completely relaxed, carefree state of mind. You have finally detached your ego from the outcome.
Look, as long as you are trying to guess the next move just to prove how smart you are, the market will find your emotional weak spots, and it will absolutely exploit them. But the very moment you accept the randomness of the micro and trust the consistency of the macro, the whole game changes. So, are you finally ready to let go of your ego? Are you ready to drop that desperate need to know the future and start executing your next 20 trades just like the casino? Start the exercise. Change your beliefs. It's time to take your edge back.